Okay, Saturday, June 28th, 2025, and I'm starting in Park Maximilian, but I'm gonna branch out, a little bit, probably go up some streets here, some streets of Brussels, as one would say, and show you around. Hopefully I don't get interrupted by some of the people who own the park. I thought it was owned by the city of Brussels, but apparently some gangbangers own it or something, I don't know. Anyway, it's not, I like to take risks and try things out, but not any unnecessary risks. So I'm going to start doing like videos that are just for one topic instead of everything all in one. So I had to do a lot of shorter videos, kind of topic by topic. So this will be the first of two videos. So I'm going to answer some more Q&A from one of the viewers, a guy back in America who's interested in Norway. So this first video is more about talking about Norway a little bit. A lot of people are asking me about it because I spent a lot of time there, and in my 40s I managed to get myself settled there without getting married or being a refugee. I just straight up got a job. I went there with $5 in my pocket and a lot of hope, and well, a little bit more than $5, but one of those sensational dream stories, and got a job in 3.5 months time. But so the question is that he asked me is about buying an apartment in Oslo, because what I'm advising is if you move to Oslo and you have the money, straight up buy an apartment if you can, versus renting. Renting in Oslo is expensive, and then you don't get any of the tax credits as being a property owner. So first, let's start with the benefits of owning in Norway. In Norway, you do get an mortgage interest deduction if you take a mortgage from the bank. Even if you take a mortgage from the US bank or take a loan against your house in America to buy a place in Norway, they'll credit that interest off your income. So you just straight off deduct, so let's say you're making 100 grand a year and then you pay $20,000 in interest. So instead of your tax being on 100,000, 25% or 40% of 100 grand, it becomes like, let's say 40%, that's more Norwegian, 40% of 80,000, same as in America. That's, they don't actually have that here in Belgium. They took that away, the mortgage interest deduction here. So yeah, there's, the only benefit to owning here, I could say, is like if you're going to be here long term, to capture the appreciation, which is good here. Property appreciation in Belgium it's a standard 5-10% somewhere, depending where you live, every year, which adds up if you're going to spend a long time here. But let's get back to Norway. So his question is like, where in Oslo do you buy? So yeah, the other benefit. I want to talk about the other benefit in Norway, which is more or less the same as in the US, is you can have a roommate rent out, I think just a little bit less than 50% of your square meters or square footage, and to a roommate or something, and charge rent, and it's tax free. So if you buy like a 2-bedroom place and rent out the extra bedroom, or you take a 1-bedroom place and turn the living room into a, just put up some partition wall and turn that into a 2nd bedroom, and you can get some pretty good money. You can get some pretty good coin. Just the same way they chop up rooms in Hong Kong, or they chop up rooms all over the place in Dubai and New York. You can make some pretty good money. So they can pay a good part of your mortgage off, and it's tax free. So that's the other benefit. Now to the location. Now let's answer the question. So Oslo. If you're going to move to Oslo, I only know Oslo really well. The rest of Norway, it's a mixed bag, but let's just stick with Oslo for now, and then we'll talk about the rest of Norway. So in Oslo, you want to be inside Ring 3, and people are asking like, oh, what's a good area and what's a bad area in Norway? I tell you, the worst area in Norway is still better than probably the better areas here of Brussels. So you have like East Oslo, like Homela, Groenland has a reputation. I don't know, some of those suburbs, but they're nothing like Stockholm, and the apartments are actually not that much cheaper in those areas. I think they're like 10,000 kroner per square meter cheaper, maybe like 10-15% cheaper than buying in the west of Oslo. But yeah, I would buy anywhere inside the Ring 3, you know, near a metro station, anywhere that you can jump on the underground, not the trams. I mean, the trams are okay, the buses are okay, but I think the best real estate is around the metros. And one example of this was an area called Tøyen, and that used to be like a real slum, but the city of Oslo rehabbed it, and it's really nice now. They have a nice center. And when we talk about bad areas in Oslo, there's really not any crime. I mean, if there is crime, it's usually like bad guy to bad guy crime, like drug dealer beating up a drug user for not paying his money, you know, paying him money or something. But there's not this like turf battles or anything like you'll be caught in, or gunfire or anything like you would have in a suburban neighborhood in America, you know, when a kid missed his meds. So like these quote unquote bad areas of Oslo, oh yeah, Hell's Fear, yeah, there's another one, I used to call it Hell's Fire. I think these are all okay. I would buy there if you don't have. It's better to buy in one of those areas than to pay rent. You know, and I wish I would have followed my own advice. But when I came into Norway, I didn't know. You know, I was like a skilled job seeker. Then I had like a visa that depended on my job. You know, and then when I got my PR, you know, I made some bad investments in stocks. You know, that's actually what taught me a lot about stocks and turned it around for me. Now I'm doing pretty good with the stocks because I lost like a lot of money picking the wrong ones. So now I know what to look for. But yeah, I wish I would have followed my own advice because like I said, and there's some appreciation in Norway, but you have to be a little cautious. Like it can be offset because the kroner is always a little bit declining. You know, the kroner is very dependent on oil prices. And American oil production is just going through the roof. And if Iran gets normalized and is not embargoed, they're going to flood the market with oil. You know, so that's the only thing you got to be wary of. There is appreciation. The properties in Oslo appreciate. And if you have a lot of money, I would buy new construction in Majorstua. You know, there's some projects going up there. You know, but that's going to be a lot more. Not a lot, but a little bit more expensive than the East Oslo. But East Oslo gets a lot of attention from the government and gets money for rehabbing, and people are moving out there. People are figuring this out. You know, so and I'll tell you, most of those people in East Oslo, from my experience, they actually have jobs and everything. The only reason why the Norwegians and people are saying it's a bad area is because there's not as, you know, people aren't white, you know, it's like a bunch of brown people, black people, but most of them got jobs. Most of them are working every day and doing something. It's not like rest of Europe and stuff where they've let the refugees just fester and stuff and then they end up causing trouble. But, you know, I have friends who are like product owners and directors in, you know, banks and stuff, and, you know, they're of Pakistani origin, you know, or Arab origin or whatever. And they're living in East Oslo and everything is fine, and they have the parks, and the parks in the East Oslo are cleaner than here in center Brussels. You know, you don't see the glass and the cigarette butts and all of that. I mean, I used to go out there. I used to go out to East Oslo a lot. I mostly lived in West Oslo. I lived in Karl Berner's Plass, which is sort of east, for like 3 months while I was waiting for an apartment to get ready. But most of those people have good jobs and everything, and actually the kids in East Oslo in the schools are more competitive because, you know, they have like Pakistani parents. You know, in Pakistanis, they're like our relatives. You know, I mean, technically my parents were born in Pakistan when it was India, so I mean, you know, that's my background. But they are serious about school, and they're the ones becoming doctors and engineers and everything. So it's a different dynamic than the rest of Europe. But like I said, you want to be close to the transportation because the traffic, I don't know why it is, but the traffic in Oslo is getting worse and worse, just like everywhere else, like Stockholm and all these other countries and stuff. So yeah, let me just move up the mic a little bit. But yeah, I'm just trying to think, like, yeah, so we have concluded that yeah, you want to be inside the Ring 3. You want to be close to a metro station, you know, on one of the Oslo lines. I think there's like all the lines go to the center and make a big circle around the center areas. I mean, that would be the most ideal. The closer you are to the center, the better. But as long as you're on a metro line, you're fine. And like I said, like I said, in Norway, when they say something is a bad neighborhood or I wouldn't live there, it's just because of the way the people look. It's really nothing is wrong with the area. I mean, of course, I would say probably West Oslo, the buildings look newer and, they have more money, I guess. People are renovating the facades, and the buildings in the East Oslo look more like this Soviet bloc. They were mass produced. That was like the second growth wave of Norway. It was like in the 70s or 80s, like Sweden. And it's like you go in the suburbs of Sweden, instead of getting these like old buildings, like you have here in Brussels, they built like these high rises, like that look like these Soviet buildings. They are just gray and tall and everything. So you see a lot more of that in the East. But those apartments too, they get sold. You buy it, you live there, you pay your mortgage, you put 25% down, you bring your money from America, you try to, get your job, and if you really have a lot, I guess maybe you have to buy it cash, and then you can back it out as a mortgage when you get your permanent residency, so you just buy it cash, and then prices go up, and after 3 years you get your PR, and then you just buy it from yourself, basically. You just mortgage your own property, and you take that cash out and you buy stocks or whatever, or buy another place and put that on rent. So now let's talk about outside Oslo. It's not a guarantee. When you buy property outside of Oslo, the prices go down a lot, especially in like the villages like Elverum, or you go up in there's this corridor down the middle, inland it, it's like there's a train that starts at Hammer and goes all the way up to Røros. I'm butchering the names and stuff, but I don't care. Røros, I don't talk like a Norwegian or something, but there's a whole bunch of little towns there like Alvdal, and you gotta really be careful what you're buying there. Some of that stuff sits on the market for years because people are leaving those little villages. It's just all grandparents. I mean, there are some refugees and stuff, they relocate there, but they get bored and they get their skills up, their Norwegian up, and then they just end up going to a city and getting a better job. I mean, some of them will open a small business there, but the trend is everyone is moving to cities. So, and Stavanger too, you got to be a little careful with, because they kind of ride the oil wave. But generally, property in Stavanger used to be very expensive when I was there, and then they had kind of a bubble burst. But Stavanger is a car city. You have to drive everywhere. I mean, they have some buses and transportation. I've been there, but mostly you drive. You take the car and go everywhere, and there's sandness and all this it's like American sprawl. Everybody lives in a house out there. There's not really that many apartments. I mean, they have some new developments, but again, you have to have a car. You go Fredrikstad. That was actually the first city in Norway I'd ever been to when I was in the Navy, and I visited Norway. I stayed in Fredrikstad, of all places, and that's a nice place in the south of Norway. Like I said, if the Norwegian schools were better, that's a place I would live in. Kongsberg, one of these like secondary cities of Norway, they're not small towns, but they're not cities. They're just something in the middle. I mean, like a one industry city or something. Those places are nice, but you just need to understand what's going on. And generally the properties there will appreciate. You can't lose in those places. It's the really small towns where you can lose. Like, you'll see online, if you go on fin.no, all these like farmhouses and stuff, and all these like really old houses, and they have like a lot of land, but they're all the way in the middle of nowhere. And some of those houses have asbestos problems. You got to check that, because real estate agents there don't tell you everything. They're not, Norway's this whole honesty thing. People tend to lose that when it comes to money. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff just sitting on the market. So my knowledge is mostly Oslo, but if you like Oslo, Stavanger, Trondheim, Bergen you can't lose. Bergen is very tight supply, very There's a lot of Western Norwegian industry there, you know, furniture industry and things like that. And then it's of course a touristic city, and they got some IT companies, IT stuff going on there. You know, Norwegian government has offices. But yeah, Bergen can be quite expensive. I don't recommend Bergen if you're just starting out in Norway. I don't know if they have. I don't think they have an underground metro. I've been there 3 or 4 times, and yeah, it's all buses and I think trams. I think they're running some trams there, above ground trams. So you know, you just have to buy close to the transportation lines, because that's what the money is. People want to walk to the transportation and go to work. You know, as soon as you get to a place where you have to have a car and you're totally dependent on a car, the prices will be cheaper, but you're going to have a lot fewer buyers, you know, potential buyers in the future. You know, Norway driving is really expensive, so that's your calculus, to always be by the transportation. You know, bus stops, you know, if you have to, if there's no metro or anything, just something where you can jump on board and get out of there. Yeah, that's my thoughts on the Norwegian real estate buying. You know, and as a foreigner, it's you really have to look. There are banks. They got a plane, full-on 747. It's probably a cargo plane, you know, flying overhead. Yeah, it's probably one of the old ones making that much noise there. But yeah, this is the other park. I'll have to put it down in the comments or something what it is. But yeah, just going up the rolling hills. Yeah. So yeah, Norway. If you're going to go move there, and you plan on staying there 3+ years, buy the place as soon as you can. And getting mortgages, yeah, you have to shop around for a bank. There's a lot of small banks and everything. It's a pain. They're going to want 25%. They're going to gouge you on the interest rates. But as soon as you get your permanent residency, and especially when you get your citizenship, then the rates drop. They drop like a stone. I remember when I bought one house in Norway, I was paying 6%, and I got my Norwegian passport, and I refinanced down to 2.5%. You know, and so the payment just dropped like a stone. You know, so that was good. And then, you know, of course, yeah. So, and what else about Norway? No, nothing else. So yeah, that's all I got. I mean, the videos are still long. Anyway, take care, and we'll see you. Bye-bye.